My son no longer speaks to me after I gifted my stepson the car I had promised him. I made a mistake by giving my old sports car to my 16-year-old stepson instead of my 20-year-old biological son, who had wanted it since he was a child. This happened last year, but yesterday I received a grim reminder. Before delving into this disastrous story, here's some background. I've been a car mechanic since I was 19 and had my own garage shop since I was 28. After the failure of my marriage, I remarried a few years later. Like my current wife, she had a son from her first marriage. My stepson was about 4 years old at the time and saw me as his real father since his own father had abandoned him. My son from my first marriage lived with his mother, but I saw him often. He used to pass by the shop on his way home from school, and occasionally he'd come in to greet me or take a look at the cars in the shop. My wife and my ex-wives got along well, and there were never any issues with my son staying over for dinner or to spend the night, even though he lived with his mother. When I turned 17, my father gifted me a black Chevrolet SARS, and I cherished that car all my life. I deeply loved that car. 90% of its parts were original, and as a mechanic, I had no problem doing everything myself, spending most of my time in my garage at home. My son also loved this car. He always wanted to ride in it and knew everything about it. He even had a little miniature car that looked like it. So, where did things go wrong? My wives remarried 8 years ago and moved to another state because her new husband was offered a better job. So, I spoke with my son, mostly over the phone, and saw him maybe every 3 or 4 months during a long weekend or half a week. Phone calls became less frequent, and he said he wanted to focus on his studies, which was understandable as he was a teenager. My stepson was 10 years old at the time, and when my son turned 16, he went to college in another state. We hardly had time to talk. My business was struggling at that time, and my wife was also very sick. It was a tough time, but somehow we got through it, and my wife is much better now. Fast forward to April 2019. My stepson turned 16 that month. He always got along with my son, so he invited him. My son was busy at the time, but he promised to show up a few days later. After everything that had happened, it had been almost 4 years since I had seen him, so I was glad he was coming. Now comes the part where I made a terrible mistake. My stepson was an excellent student, even when things were tough. He got good grades in school and even got into college, where he wanted to study medicine. My wife and I were very proud of him, so I decided to gift him my old Chevrolet Alex Averno for his 16th birthday. He was very impressed with the car, as were his friends. It's a car that still impresses to this day, and it also impressed my son, but in a way that could have cost me my relationship with him. I sent him a photo of the car at his 16th birthday party, unaware of what would happen next. My son sent me a reply saying it was a joke. At the time, I didn't understand, and I replied that it wasn't because he called me a few seconds later yelling that it was a joke. He told me, "You can now check if there's a part 2 by pressing share and more."